Welcome aboard the BioTrain. In this video we're going to talk about genetics, which is the study of how characteristics are passed from one generation to the next. Humans recognized that the offspring of organisms tended to share many of the characteristics of their parents. They knew that something had to be passed from one generation to the next, but they weren't quite sure what it was. We now know that this information is passed in DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. Chromosomes are made from DNA and are found in the nucleus in eukaryotic cells and in the cytoplasm of prokaryotic cells. It's important to remember that chromosomes come in pairs. They're called homologous pairs or homologous chromosomes. They're the same size, the same shape, and have the same types of genes. For instance, in this drawing, these are supposed to represent homologous chromosomes or a homologous pair. Notice they're the same size, the same shape, and have the same types of genes represented as these darkened in areas. The next thing to understand is that every species has a certain number of chromosomes. It's called the diploid number, and it's represented by using a 2n. Let's look at three different examples of the diploid numbers for different species. We have the human species with a diploid number of 46. That means that there's 23 homologous pairs or 23 pairs. The gray wolf has 78 chromosomes or 39 homologous pairs. And a fruit fly, the diploid number is 8, which means there are 4 pairs of chromosomes in the fruit fly species. The next important concept to understand is what a gene is. Understanding genes is central to understanding how characteristics are passed from one generation to the next. Genes are actually sections of DNA or chromosomes that contain the information to make a specific protein. You have the characteristics you do because you inherited genes that give you the information you need to make specific proteins, and then those proteins affect your characteristics. Many of them are enzymes. Proteins are involved in almost everything that you do and ultimately control your characteristics. Remember, genes come in pairs because chromosomes come in pairs, and there can be different forms of a gene in a species' gene pool. Genes control an organism's traits by making these proteins, which I just said. You also need to know what an allele is. An allele is basically another name for a gene. It's used when referring to gene pairs or when referring to different forms of a gene. Instead of saying gene pair, you can say alleles. Alleles are often used interchangeably, so just keep it in your mind that whenever you hear the term allele, they're basically talking about a gene. Alleles come in different forms. For example, you can have dominant alleles or recessive alleles, and there's many other relationships between genes. But just keep in mind that genes come in pairs, but there can be many different types of a gene in a particular gene pool. Now, this can seem a little confusing and overwhelming at first, but stick with it and you'll be successful with this topic. I hope that helps you stay comfortably seated on the BioTrain.